All right, so we now have like semi-fixed basically the jumping right mechanic and the collisions a little bit. Now what we need to do is that it's not really a game because we can't really. A game requires at least two things generally. Not today's games because you guys play like weird things, but it's supposed to be traditionally. It's victory, a victory condition, and the ability to lose. Where you need to have one of those, at least one of those two things. Okay, so those are typically what you would expect inside of a game. And right now we can run or we can jump around, but we're not actually able to win or lose. Okay, so I'm going to concentrate on losing first because that's the kind of guy I am. And one of the things that, like, right off the bat is kind of broken about my game is that if I jump off the edge here, if I go wee, right, I don't ever die. I just fall for infinity, right? Which is not, I mean, it might be kind of fun. I mean, people skydive, but it's not really fun for a video game because it never goes anywhere. So what I want to do is I'm going to create basically like fall damage. I'm going to make an object that's going to be underneath our entire level that when you hit it, it will reset my position to the starting position. That makes sense? So that's the goal here. So what I need to do is I need to make basically an object that's going to go inside of my background object. Okay? It has to go inside of it because you remember my player doesn't actually move. It's this that's moving, right? So I want I want anything that I want to be attached to that background anything I want to move with the background has to be part of this background object that is the thing that we're moving around. Okay, so I'm going to open it up. So I'm in the background object. I'm going to make a new layer. Apparently I already made one. And we'll just call this fall death. We'll call it. All right, and I'm just going to put underneath this. Not that it matters, but okay. And then I'm just going to back this up. And I am going to just draw a big old box. Just make sure it has a fill. Doesn't really need a stroke, but just have a fill on it. And then just make sure it's large, like that. The idea is that I need to be able to, when I fall off here, I need to be able to land into this, okay? And it needs to be a decent amount of thickness because just like we ran into that issue before, let's make this a little bit thicker. We'll go like that. Just like we ran into before, you know, I want to make sure that we run into the collision because if we get past this, then that's it. Then the game you'll just be falling forever. So this is my last attempt. Okay, now with this object, it's going to need to be like right now. This is more than large enough, but as my level gets larger, like if you know, you'd keep going to the right here. If I get past this object and I fall off, there's nothing to catch me. So this object, you might need to scale it or change the size of it. Once you've developed your map, right? Your level design. So I'm going to double click the whole thing and I'm just going to go modify, convert to symbol. We'll just make it a movie clip. And we'll just call this fall death box underscore M underscore MC. And that'll be our fall death box. And to actually use it, it needs an instance name in order for us to test against it. So we'll just call it fall death. All right, and we now have the elements that we need in order to make this work. Okay, so you can see now it's part of my big old box here. So I'm going to hit F9 to open up the actions, and I'll just click on this guy to see them. Okay, so we need to test it. So we have a section down here that we had added before where basically we're doing two tests, right? I'm testing whether I'm hitting the ground. We have one for that. That basically keeps us from falling through. And then we have another one that hits that's testing whether we're hitting a wall. Okay. Now, these both work fine, and they're great, and they should be the way that they are. We're going to do something very similar, but we're not going to use. If you look, what we did is that we did background, and then on the background we did hit test point. Now I don't remember if I mentioned this or not. There's basically two types of testing collisions. The main ones. One is hit test point, and the other one's hit test object. Okay, when it's hit test point, what it does is it actually tests the points, like the actual drawing of it. So, like for instance, when we're playing around here, right, it's testing this shape in here. Okay, when you do hit test object, it actually tests the object itself, and in this case, the object is the bounding box. See this blue line? So if I had used hit test object for either one of those, the ground or what have you, the ground or the wall check, we would just be running on top of this blue line. Like there would be no, and it uses the whole object. So you might be like, well, why don't you just use hit test point all the time? Well, obviously, if you're using hit test point, especially depending on the complexity of the shape, it's going to take a lot of processing power, right? So hit test object is actually better if you can help it. So if you're doing things where like you have projectiles that you're shooting, you can just do a hit test object, right? It doesn't matter if it tests, like if it's a bullet shape that it's rounded on the edge. Now, granted, you know, it'll look like it'll hit you, but it won't graphic. No one's going to notice. You know, or if like you're doing enemies, we're going to do enemies too, or if you're just trying to pick up points and things like that, they don't need to be hit test point. You can just do hit test object. And that's actually what we're going to use for this, because I don't need to test that it's like, perfectly. Now, if this was some sort of like valley or something, and I don't want you to die until like you get to a particular spot in it, then yes, I need to use that. But I'm just going to use, double click on it, this thing's bounding box. So I'm going to do hit test object for that. Okay. So it's going to be a little bit different, but also very similar. So we're going to do, after this, we'll just do death. We'll call it fall death. Fall death reset, we'll call it. All right. So we're going to do if. And then we're going to test what's inside these parentheses. So if what's inside these parentheses are true, it's going to do what's inside of this code, okay? And so what we're going to do, our statement we're going to test is going to go ahead and be the background, much like it was before. And it's not going to be background and then dot, I'll show you something. We're going to do background dot hit test, I always write text, test object. And then what we'll test against, and then that's going to go in parentheses, okay, because that's a function or a method that we're running inside of that. It's also a function, but and what we're going to test is we'll test the ground check, just so that, I mean, it could be player, it could be either one of those, doesn't really matter, but I'm going to do ground check because the ground check would hit first. So do ground check dot x and ground check, come on, buddy, check dot y. And then we will set it to true. All right. This will not work. And the reason why is that it's testing the background. If you remember, I mentioned dot notation. So whenever you do a dot notation, it's kind of like file folder structure, right? So inside of my background symbol, there is the method that's in there. It's just a built-in method that has, all objects have it, that has the ability to test whether it hits another object. But I actually don't want to test my background. My background is this whole thing, right? You can see right here, background. That's not what I want to test. I want to test this thing, fall death. But I don't write .fall death because I can't get to fall death except through background. So it's actually going to be written like this. It's going to be background dot fall death dot hit test object, because fall death is an object inside of the other object. See what I'm saying? So it's almost like it's a folder inside of another folder, and in that folder, it has the ability to test this. So we're saying basically, if we hit that, what do I want to happen? So what we're going to do is, we don't really have a way to like close the program. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to reset the position back to where we started. And so I'm just going to scroll up to the top here. And here's my positions right here. So I'm just going to copy this text. And you can just go up there where it says var your, yours will say, what will yours say? Yours will say scroll X, I think. Scroll X and scroll Y. I wrote this again to fix it because I want to put comments and stuff in it. So, but yours will say scroll X and scroll Y, and it'll have two numbers there. Basically, it's the starting position of the background. So I'm just going to grab this, Control C. Or actually, if you're using the lab, which I suggest using the lab materials, then you can just copy those like they are. But if you're starting from yours, that's what it would be. So, and we'll paste it here. Okay, boom, and I am going to get rid of var because we're not redeclaring these variables. It'll actually make it break, and we don't need to set that either. We're not redeclaring the variables. I literally just want to say take the back position, X and Y, and reset them back to 125 and 450. This actually won't quite work. We need to do one other thing. You got to remember that currently we're falling when we hit this, probably super fast. So we actually have to set our Y speed. We got to set that to 0 as well, so that we set ourselves back to not moving again. So we're going to reset the position of the background, which is like resetting the position of the player. And then we're going to set the Y speed to 0. So now if we test that, hopefully it works. It's always errors. Oh, didn't get an error. Okay, well, let's see. Oh, we got one. Expected 1, got 3. Display, hit test object, let me count. Okay, not sure what they're saying there. Hit test object, dismiss all. Let's close that. Let's see. Hit test object, ground check dot x. I'm gonna pause it and fix it, and then we'll be. Okay, so I wrote it like hit test point. We actually didn't want hit test point, so it should have just been. It should just be this, like that, because we're just testing whether two objects are hitting. We're not testing the points of objects, so I don't need to put the point. So that should work. That's why I was saying it was expecting one argument, not 3, because I had 3 things in there. So anyway, that should work. So now I'm just going to go over here, and we're going to go off to the thing here, and then boom, we reset. So now whenever I go off the edge, woo, we'll just reset right here. Now eventually, obviously, I want to take, these are all like just crappy beginning graphics, but that will reset us back up there, and that is good. So again, the code just looks like this, so this will just reset us after our fall death. And I think I'm going to end this video, and in the next one, what I'm going to do is we will do some really, really basic enemies. I'm just going to make 2 to start with, and that'll be the next one. And then the last video will just be to create a scoring system. Okay?